different backgrounds coming together as well. Okay, very happy to have you all here. My name is Manish Shanbhag. Okay, and I will be your facilitator for today. I'll be taking you through the presentation, and we're going to look at a topic called product teardown today. Okay, product teardown. With me, I have Fred, who is also online. He can help you with any logistics issues. If you have, you can use the chat. He'll be also moderating the chat. So if you have any questions or comments also at any point of time, feel free to use the chat. Okay, and then I'll be seeing it here. And if you have any questions, I'll be responding those questions to those questions at certain logical ends of the topics. Okay, or we'll also have a Q&A towards the end. The webinar is going to be roughly for 40-45 minutes, and then we keep some time for discussions or questions if you may have, for which you can use the chat. All right, great. So let's start off with the proceedings. Okay, right. Everybody has seen this. Everybody knows about this brand. Everybody has probably used one of the products of IKEA, right? So let's imagine, I'm just going to paint a little bit story for you. Okay, let's imagine that you want to move. Okay, you want to shift houses, okay, or apartments. You want to shift from one place to the other, and you have this Billy bookcase, right? Some of you might be actually having it, right? You have this Billy bookcase, which is fairly big and which cannot be moved or transferred as is. Okay, so what you do is you think of disassembling this Billy bookcase, okay, and then moving it to the new place and then assembling it again. Okay, that's the scenario, right? So you start off, you look at the instructions. You probably built it yourself as well as a part of your DIY project, right? So you start looking at the instructions. You look at the instructions and start disassembling it. You take off some of the main planks here. Then you start taking off some of the nails which are stuck behind, and then you can see typically you're taking off the back, and then all the nuts and bolts and screws and some of these small wooden pieces that hold these things together, you start taking it off, eventually ending up with something like this. Okay, eventually ending up with something like this, where you go to a certain level of granularity where you cannot tear it down further. That's the granularity you have reached. So you know at the end that you have 12 such type of screws. You have 18 or 16 and then 12 again, and then 4 of these type, 2 of these type, etc., with all these different planks and so on and so forth. So what we have done is we have disassembled, or we have tore down this Billy bookcase to its granular state. Okay, that's the first scenario. Now imagine another scenario. Think about this for a bit. Okay, you might have all done this even, right? Think of Legos. I'm sure everyone has at some point of time interacted with Legos, right? I have this with me as well. Do you see this? I hope you can see this. I've got this Lego. So it was built by my daughter actually, and this is from Lego Technique. Okay, and then there are all these different parts that you need to assemble. There is a manual, there's an instruction. I picked up one of these. Okay, this little guy is watching you here. Okay, and I'm going to disassemble this little guy here. Okay, so what I do is I just take this off, one piece off. So this has come out. Okay, I keep it aside. I take another piece off, I keep it aside. Okay, and then I take this one off, and then I have these different pieces. There's another one which I can take off. Okay, what I have done again is tore down this product. Okay, so think of Legos. You're assembling and then you're disassembling, and effectively you're tearing down, and then I can put it back again. Okay, then I can put it back again to form this guy. So what I have done is I've tore down this product, and that's the simplest definition of what we call product teardown. Okay, very simple, in very simple terms. We'll get into the complexities later on, but you can think of Legos, you can think of what you have done with the IKEA product. right? So what is product teardown? We're going to look at what is product teardown, why product teardown is done in industries. It's very, very important. We're going to look at different perspectives of product teardown, and then the process itself. And this is more important. This is the how of the product teardown methodology, how you do it, which is the process. And then we'll see, as this is a procurement forum, procurement supply chain forum, what is the value add of procurement in these different scenarios that we have seen. Okay, so let's look at product teardown. Very simple definition. A product teardown or a teardown is simply the act of disassembling a product or taking apart, as we did with this little guy here, as we did with the Billy bookcase, and as you can do with many other products. Take a product, you can see here, you can take a product and then disassemble it or take it apart to its granular state. Sometimes it may not be possible to go to its most granular state, right? If you do that, probably you might end up in destroying some parts, right? So in some cases, the teardown can become destructive, right? But we'll talk about that. We'll try and avoid destructive teardown. Okay, but we are trying to see what is not destructive, and that's what we will call it as the most granular level. Okay, so what we are doing is we are trying to disassemble this product to understand a few things. Okay, so while we are doing this, as you know, you know how it is made. So now I know this little guy is made of 1 2 3 4 5 pieces. Okay, one is black piece with so many number of heads. Then I know there is this green piece with 4 heads. There is this different angular kind of kind of a thing, and then I have this face which is painted in certain colors, and it has certain heads, and so on and so forth. So I know how this is made. Okay, I also know how does this work. Okay, how does this work when I start putting in place? When I did the Lego technique here, this is a more complex. I'm not going to tear this down here right now, but I know how does this work when I do disassemble it, and I know what piece is connected to what. So for example, I know that this particular piece is connected to some battery. If I take it out, I know how exactly this is working, as the electricity will flow from this battery into the system, and then I can have moving parts, sensors, and so on and so forth, right? So I know exactly how does it work even when I start looking at breaking down the product and looking into details of this. Okay, so that's what we call product teardown. So if you look at products around you, right, look at products around you. These are built from start, and in product teardown, what we are doing is we are doing the reverse. We are looking at the product, tearing it down to its most granular or modular form. Okay, it's also sometimes referred to as creative destruction. We are actually not destroying this as such, but we are breaking it down to understand how it is made, how does it work, and that can give you a certain idea. So there are various applications of product teardowns, and we'll see that. But the primary reasons of why this is done is what we will see. Why product teardown? So now, if you come back to industry, okay, when we come back to when we look at industry, the Lego, the Billy bookcase are examples which you might you might relate to personally. But when we start looking at all these products that we have around us in our industry, you need to understand first, why do you want to do this exercise? Okay, why do you want to do tear down in the first place? There are multiple reasons why you would do that. There are some of these reasons here, the 5 reasons, the primary reasons which I have mentioned here. In addition, there could be others as well, but the 5 primary reasons are: one is customer value. We will look at the details of this in a bit, but customer value is one. What value does this product add to the customer? When we look at the granular nature, we'll also understand what value does each part add to the customer. Okay, what customer value does each of these parts provide? So if I have this part and I have this particular wire connected to it through a battery, I know that, okay, this is supplying electricity, so because of which this is going to function in a certain manner, and so on and so forth. I know that this is going to add some value to the customer, right? So I know what value is added. I'm going to look at the design. How is the design of the product being made? Why it is done in a certain manner and not in another way? Okay, so I'm going to look at the design. For procurement, and we will come to that, for procurement, it's also about cost reduction. Okay, I got another example for you here, and I like this example very much. This is one of my favorites actually. So I play tennis. Okay, and I was looking at this box. You see this box? Okay, this it has a certain, and it has the balls inside, right? And I was looking at this cover. Okay, I was looking at this cover. This cover is a full cover, and it sits on top, right? So the balls don't fall out, and it is a nice cover for this. Then I picked up another one the other day. This cover. Now this cover is the same ring. It has a hole in between. Okay, when I put this back, of course the balls don't fall. Okay, they're stuck here. But what I've done is I've seen the utilities of these covers. When I start breaking it down, I see that there is this cover here, and when I put this back, it serves the same functionality of holding the balls inside, right? But what I do, imagine now I'm doing this in millions. I'm doing this in millions. I can save plenty. I can save my costs by removing plenty of raw material here, right? It serves the same purpose, right? So that's another example of how it can be used. Why we are doing this? When we start analyzing products to the granular level, we understand the purpose of each of these parts, and then we can come up with action plans where we say, you know what, probably I can take that cover base, the top out. It'll still serve the same purpose, but I can get millions of euros or dollars of reduction in costs on raw material. Okay, so cost reduction could be one of the advantages again of why we would do product teardown to understand. There is value stream mapping. We would also know who are all the players in the entire supply chain when we look at how the assembly is made, which part is added where, and so on and so forth. And then we can map the entire value stream. Okay, and then identify action plans coming out of it. You could also do standardization, right? Standardization of parts, of processes. When we look at multiple parts, if I look at this Lego, this guy here, and there's another product in another business unit of mine which is doing something similar, and I see similar parts being used, maybe there is a possibility that I can consolidate and I can standardize these parts, right? So I get volume benefits, right? And then effectively making it easy for manufacturing, making it easy for assembly. I can get cost reductions at the same time, and so on and so forth. So it's important to understand why we want to do product teardown. Okay, you could have multiple reasons as well at the same time. So you could work with standardization and cost reduction. Okay, because standardization might help you for cost reduction to do cost reductions, right? When you do value stream mapping, it might help you to work with what value can I add to the customer by changing certain things, by optimizing certain things, right? So there could be various reasons as to why would you want to do product teardown, and we will see in the process, we will see one of the key reasons as to identify why you want to do the product teardown in the first place. Okay, but these are the classical reasons of why would you do a product teardown. Okay, right, moving on. If we look at some of these different perspectives and elaborate on these 5 different benefits that we see as to the reasons as to why we are doing product teardown, let's look at customer value. As I talked about, as I said before, when you do the product teardown, you could have a end user centric view of the product that is being used. Okay, how is the end user using it? Okay, why are they using it? How are they using it? Okay, where do they find it useful? What are the different advantages, disadvantages, pros, cons of the product? When we look at each and every part, we try to understand what each and every part adds value, okay, to the customer. Functional specifications, you could look at functional specifications. So one of the key things, and also it's linked to the procurement, it's a strong contribution from procurement, is when we are looking at functional specifications, we want to know why we are buying whatever we are buying from a procurement's perspective. Okay, so if you have a particular product that that is assembled at your plant, and you're buying certain stuff to assemble it, certain material to assemble it, you'd want to know why we are buying whatever we are buying. What is the reason? In many cases, we have seen procurement working with technical specs, right? But here we are moving one step before and understanding the functional specifications. Okay, so when you do the product teardown, another advantage is you understand each of these granular parts that you have now disassembled, and then say, why is this part there? What function does it serve? How is it useful to the customer? Okay, that's another way to look at it. What's the unique selling point, basically? Okay, what's the USP of the part, right? The ergonomy and ease of use, how easy it is to use. So we have seen this, how easy it is to use. If you have to put in these particular two parts here, is it easy to use? How is it ergonomic? If I have a pencil with me, I have a pencil. How ergonomic it is? Can I easily hold it? Is it cumbersome to use? Can I move it with ease, etc.? Then I start looking at the ease of use of the ergonomy as well. So all this is from a customer value perspective. Okay. We'll also look at it from design perspective. From design, once we start breaking it down, the first thing that we get, and that's one of the results that we end up when we do a product teardown, is the bill of material, right? The BOM. When we start looking at the most granular level, we will see what is the bill of material of assembling this particular Lego piece or this particular thing made out of Lego technique, or if this Billy bookcase, if we just go back again and look at this, this is the bill of material, as you can see, of this final product. So we know each and every component that gets in to form that product. Okay, that's another use. The architecture itself, we understand the architecture, we understand the manufacturing process, how the product is being made at each step, right? Then I talked about cost reduction a little bit. So we know about material costs. I gave you the example of these tennis caps, no? The caps that are held here. So you once you know these kind of the architecture, the product design, and so on and so forth, we know what could be the possible avenues to reduce costs. Can I reduce material costs? Can I reduce labor costs? And any other costs as part of the breakdown that we have seen? How can I reduce those? Okay, so cost reduction becomes very critical. We can also do the value stream mapping, right? So as I said before, once we do the details, once we get the process map, what else can I do with it? Can I internalize certain services? Can I internalize certain products? And make them internally, or the other factor being I just buy them as I'm doing now. So it gives you a good base for a make or buy analysis, right? So once you know all these products, maybe you say, you know what, there's another plant of mine which is doing this particular wire. Maybe I can make it in my plant. I have certain volumes, I have certain economies of scale that I can benefit from. I'm going to make this here, or within this part I can say that, you know what, this particular part which is more expensive, I can break this down further and see what else can I do with this part. So you have decision making to make when you have, make or buy kind of a situation. You could also look at lean. Where can I cut costs? Where can I cut waste? When you assemble the products, when you know the granularity, where can I cut waste? Largely about lean processes. And then we talk about standardization itself. Yeah. Or what parts does this have? If you have, let's say, if you are in a company which has multiple business units, multiple plants across the globe, and we have the product teardown in the US or in Europe or in Asia somewhere, we have similar kind of products. We break down those products and understand that there are many parts which are common. Maybe I group them, I standardize them instead of having these regional differences. There is a possibility, and then I can see if I can optimize this, with volume bundling, consolidation, and so on and so forth. Okay, we also look at the process, the design itself, which can be linked to the design process itself, right, with the bill of material, architecture, and so on. And then finally, the assembly. Can the assembly be standardized as well when I have multiple products to do? Okay, so this is again giving you a bit more in detail as to what could be the advantages, why I want to do a product teardown. Okay. Then we look at the how of it. And this is again very important. This is a generic how of it. There could be subtle differences based on the industries, but this is a generic how. Okay. And this is a very um, this is an overview of a process which is generic. As I said, there could be small modifications done based on the product or based on the industry that you are on, that you are in. But generally speaking, these are typically the steps that you can follow on how a product teardown is done. Okay, so the first step here we're talking about is the context. Okay, so you define the context, explain the context of the product being considered for the teardown. Okay, what is its primary function? Why is this used? So if I'm going to tear down this particular box, I want to see what is the primary function. It is to hold the tennis balls, where it is used, the context around the product. Does it require some auxiliary support, or does it require auxiliary or support products on top of this? So does it sit on top of something? Does it require auxiliary or support products, or does something sit on top of it to make it functional? So we define all this. We define the context, and that is very critical upfront to understand the basic functionalities, where it is used, and the business context around it. Okay. Then we start looking at the product details, right? The details of the price, quantity that you generally have, to go a little, because this will be used later on in the analysis. Okay, who are the current supply chain members? Who is, if they have a full manufacturing process, or you have some distributors in between, the installation process, all these details that we are looking at, and the product, everything that revolves around the product, including intellectual property details, if at all, right? Because they could have certain implications later on. So identify all these details of the product, right? Pictures, quantity, price, all the delivery details, and so on. Everything about the product itself. Initially, we identify the context, right? What is the use? Why it is used? Where it is used? Then we do look at the product details itself, and then we try and understand why you want to do the product breakdown, product teardown exercise. Because if your focus is purely on cost reduction, right? If your focus is, I want to do a product teardown with a very strong focus of cost reduction, then your objective will be something different, right? You will look at the material costs, you will look at the labor costs, the process costs. you know that would be your primary focus. If you say that I'm going to do this to add more customer value, then your focus will be slightly different. We are not looking at material and labor, but probably look at ergonomy, look at what is the USP of the product, and so on. If your focus is design, you look at product architecture. How is the assembly being made? Is it the manufacturing process itself, the bill of material, and so on and so forth, right? So it's important to understand why you want to do a product teardown. Okay. And with that focus, your objectives, which will come out eventually, will be different. Okay. So context, the product details, the purpose, why you want to do this. And then you look at, preparing for a teardown. So this is an important step. You want to identify the key elements needed to prepare for the teardown, right? Of course, you will have all the tools, you'll have all the teams. Basically, this is a team exercise. Identify the right people who would be needed for this. Identify the subject matter experts, maybe who could take, who you would want to consult, and so on. Identify the tools for disassembly, documentation process. How will you use certain templates? How do you document? If I want to break this down, I want to know, okay, this part I'm going to put this here, I want to document it. Okay, what part is this? How is it made? What are the different heads involved? What is the color, etc.? I'll have all that documentation. Then I'm going to break down this part. I will have documentation of that. Okay. The recording equipment of cameras, videos, etc. So you know the process. In case you have missed something, you can go back and refer and see. I can give you a personal example where I kind of messed it up a little bit, and this is the result of this. I tried to do a breakdown of my Mac, I had a Mac computer, and I wanted something. I wanted magnets out of it just to experiment on something, and I opened it up. Didn't document it very well, you know and I took out a few things, and this hard disk is still remaining outside. I still need to put it back, right? So there could be errors that can be made as well. So this is one of the errors that I made, and I learned from it, right? So be sure that you have the right documentation, right equipment before you even start the process of the teardown. Okay. Also make a note of I mean, avoiding, at least for the first few iterations when you start disassembling it, avoid destructive disassembly in the first few iterations. If you want to break it down, and if you come to a granularity level where you want to destroy the product, it cannot be put back again. So, for example, if you look at the Billy bookcase, and you come at a plank, and if you want to break open the plank, there is no you cannot go more modular, and you would probably have to destroy the plank. I wouldn't recommend to do it in the first few iterations. Okay, maybe wait for it, and then you can have a destructive disassembly later on. Okay, so the after preparing for the teardown, you have the disassembly process itself. So coordinate the disassembly with measurement, with experimentation, with noting down all these details. You can measure every sub component, yeah, because we are trying to jot down everything, all the details. When we come to the bill of material, eventually, you have the quantity, dimensions, what is the material, the weight, and so on and so forth. Okay, you could also have the documentation of the manufacturing process itself. Okay, how do you think that this has been made? So how is the assembly done? What do you think is the manufacturing process for each of the subcomponents, and so on? Okay, so that's about disassembly. And then finally, as a result, what we are looking at is we are looking at building data sheets or models, right? Building data sheets. So when you're documenting every detail, you're documenting in data sheets. You could have creating the bill of material, some diagrams. You can have the value stream map itself, process map. These are all the results of the product teardown. How is that product made? What are the different components, the quantities, the bill of, I mean, basically the details about each and every component that gets in the product. So if I break down this now, I will probably end up with 150 smaller items, and that is with all the details, with the color, with the weight, length, height, material used, etc., etc. Right? That is what I would end up with. So depending on the purpose you identified earlier, if it was largely working on the design and trying to see, you could end up with a bill of material, or you could end up with functional models if you're focusing a bit more on the customer value part. Of course, the result is not just oriented towards one specific purpose. You could mix it, as I said. You could have a bill of material and then understand the material costs in it, and then go for cost reduction actions, right? So once you have these details, you can build further and have this for multiple usages. Okay, so this is the overall process: context, product details, the purpose, why you want to do it. You want to be very clear about it. Preparing for the teardown, very important not to make mistakes like this that I did before. Disassembly, so basically looking at all the details, jotting down everything, and then eventually these are the data sheets and models that you will end up with. Okay, so that's why what the process itself. So again, if we look at the reverse process, so you have the final products, as I mentioned. Then it's like looking back, going in the reverse direction of assembly, right? So you have the product, you take each and every element, and you come up with the final one. Here we are trying to take it apart and come to the final bomb or final details of each and every element that gets into that product. Okay, that's the overall. There's one example that I would like to share here, which is this is, now you have Fairphone 4 even, but I like this example because they also give details about what is the breakdown. So if you have an average consumer price, which talks about it says 525. Now with the Fairphone 4, it is different, but I just took this example of Fairphone 2. I'm just going to share with you another document here really quickly. Just a second. Okay, there you go. This is a PDF document, as you can see. Just going to zoom it a little bit. Yeah, so this is what we have seen. And if I go down and try and understand this, the breakdown of this, it says, it has a average consumer price, it has taxes and reseller margin, and so on and so forth. It gives a little bit detail. Now, if I look at the product details itself on the next slide, here you can see total product cost is X. Within that, you have material cost. I think it's a bit tiny, but this is the maximum I could go. So you have material costs, which is around 230 euros. Then you have some royalties. The manufacturing and assembly itself costs certain amount, which is further broken down. 3720 is further broken down in line, equipment, labor, etc., etc. There's one example of how each and every element of that product can be broken down is a cost breakdown exercise. Okay, and then you can use this cost breakdown exercise further on to improvise, to build, to have cost reduction actions, cost avoidance actions, negotiating with suppliers on different different elements, and so on and so forth. You could use this for multiple purposes eventually. Okay, so that's what I wanted to quickly share with you. Just 1 second, let me go back to the presentation. There you go. Okay, so this is what we have seen, the why and the how with all the details, and we end up with, as an example of cost breakdown, Fairphone 2 is a very good example of those details, having all those details when you do a product teardown, eventually used for a cost breakdown exercise. Okay, then we come to the final part where we talk about value add of procurement. I've been hinting to this while we spoke while we discussed earlier, is the different areas in which procurement can add value. Okay, so when we do this exercise, first and foremost thing, it is not an exercise that procurement can do alone. Okay, and that's very, very clear. It is also not an exercise that only the production team can do, or only the engineering team can do, or only the R&D can do, some technical people can. No, it's a combined team exercise. Okay, because you might require different expertise, you need to understand different elements out of it, and so it's a team effort. Setting up a team in the first place is very, very critical. Okay, so if you look at where the value add is, I've just color coded it. The dark green ones are where the biggest value add comes in from procurement's perspective. Okay, so here you have cost reduction, for example. I just spoke about it. I give you the example of the tennis case cap, right? So I look at material. I can see maybe I can save that much amount of material without disturbing the USP, without disturbing the functional requirement. Okay, then maybe I can look at labor cost. If I have to reduce that, I look at labor costs, which is automatically reduced because the amount of effort and work done required to do that kind of a part will be reduced. So cost reduction could be one of the strongest contributions that procurement can do in a product tear down exercise. Okay, there are limitations to cost reductions, right? So you could get up to 5, 10, 15%. If you want to add a bit more, maybe you can do value stream mapping, or even go back to functional specs in the customer value segment. You can look at the manufacturing process, and then for standardization, looking at parts and processes and so on. So these are the strongest contributions that procurement can do, which is in dark green. The other ones, which are in light green, yes, procurement can still add value there, but maybe you'd have to work closer and try to understand a bit more details with the technical team, the production, the R&D, and so on and so forth, where the product architecture itself, or the design itself, the assembly itself, the end user centric view itself might be that these departments' biggest contributions. Procurement might be necessary to support and try and understand these details, so that you can go back to your suppliers and work on this, get in an outside in innovative perspective, okay, into the company. So let's say if we talk about end user centric, Once we understand those details, procurement can go back to their suppliers and see how can we contribute to enhance or to add more value to the customer from an end user perspective, or what can be done to change the ergonomy of the product, and so on and so forth. So these are areas where maybe procurement doesn't take the lead, but still can have a very strong contribution in the entire process. So you can see plenty of areas in which procurement can add value, certain areas where they can add more value than others. Okay, so this is where we talk about value add of procurement. There are some other areas that you could potentially question, try and understand. Aside from these, even for example, aside from this, we have sustainability, for example. That's one of the big agendas now in many companies all over the world. Sustainability could be, so if I have a product tear down exercise, I will understand each component. I will understand maybe the carbon footprint of that particular component in the process itself. So you have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? So I understand the scope 3. And I think plenty of the industries and plenty of organizations today have this objective of understanding scope 3, which is largely procurement contributions, and then work towards net zero goals by 2030, by 2050, and so on and so forth. So sustainability angle is another way in which procurement can add value, and then select the right suppliers, change the manufacturing processes, etc., and then add value eventually. Right. So there could be other benefits as well. These are the primary five, I would say. But then there are other benefits that could be either byproducts or strong focuses itself, like sustainability, for example, where you'd want to work on some net zero action plans with your suppliers. Okay, some other questions that you could potentially include, some approaches that you could do is, once you understand who is using your product, how are they using it, then you could create also a user persona to understand the user journey. You can simulate the journey and try to see where is the user using the product, how is the user using it, what are these different parts serving when the user is using it. Okay, and so on and so forth, and then try to optimize it and come to a user story eventually. And then of course you can use that to optimize these elements and also answer these different questions. So there are other benefits eventually that you can get from product teardown in the process. Okay, right, so that's what I wanted to discuss today. The why, the what is product teardown, the why of it, yeah, why you want to do it, and when, of course, for identifying each of these benefits, the value add that comes especially from procurement, certain areas in which you have a strong value add, certain areas in which the value add can be slightly lower, but of course you can contribute more when working in teams. And then the how to do it, so you know the context, you understand the business context, you jot down all the details about the product, you understand the purpose why. So this is what you'd go back again. Preparing for the teardown, remember documentation, videos, camera, not make mistakes. Don't have to do it in a hurry. You need to prepare everything, documentation while disassembling it, and then eventually coming up with data sheets or models and so on and so forth. Okay, and remember the summary is, think Legos. When you want to disassemble this little guy here, or this big here, or a MacBook, or any other product that you see around, think about Legos and think about IKEA as well when you're trying to disassemble things. Okay, so that's the overall summary of what, why, and when, value add of procurement, and the how of product teardown. All right, that's it. Thank you very much from my side. So as I said, around 40 minutes. I would like to then hear from you. Any comments? You can use the chat. As I said, the chat is moderated. If you have any questions, comments, queries, any other inputs that you would like, if you have had experience, right, of doing such exercises, and I want to share that experience, you can write it in the chat. I can read it aloud to everybody as well. Okay, so I can see everyone: Robert, Sanamari, Piyush, Mike, Maite, hello there. I recognize some people. Very good. Magdalena, Gavin, Cedric, Anna. Alice, please go ahead if you have any questions, queries, or any comments. You can put it across in the chat. I'll wait for a minute or two. Did you find it interesting? You can have some comments on the content itself. If you want to see something else later on, some additions, you can mention that as well. All right. Thank you, Sanamari. Okay. No questions. Procurement engineering, Robert. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. So as I said, it's the simplest. It's at the surface. We are just looking at it. We are just scratching the surface of the process of product teardown and the details behind. There are much more details, and each of these different elements can be used in different ways. All right. Thank you, Robert, for your comment. All right. Wait for a minute or two before, if anybody else. Okay, Maxi, thanks for sharing your knowledge. What do you recommend to help people buying? What do you recommend? Sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to read. What do you recommend to help people buying the initiative? The initiative of the product teardown itself. Again, as I said, first of all, this is a team effort. So procurement has to push in to build credibility and visibility in the first place. And product teardown is an excellent tool, let's say, or a lever to build that credibility and visibility for procurement. So especially in the areas of stronger value add, procurement can take a lead. And if you take a lead, set up a business case, communicate internally, that, and then you have to become a seller internally. You have to become a seller, explain the people what is the value add, how it can benefit the organization, etc., and then drive that initiative itself. So my recommendation in that would be to first set up a business case, set up a team in place, explain to the people why you want to do it, what is the value add, and then build that credibility and visibility eventually for procurement as well. And you can see very clearly some of the benefits that you will get for the organization, for your department, and for you as an individual as well, as a part of the learning process. So I would definitely put that as a strong lever to be used to push this initiative across in your organizations. All right. Just looking at other comments. If you have any thoughts assessing the costs that are from R&D on a product, I would be interested to hear them. If you have any thoughts of assessing the costs that arise from R&D on a product. Yeah. So again, this would be a reverse. So if you look at two ways. One is when you start from scratch, and product teardown is you're doing the reverse. You're taking an existing product and going back, right? So when you're going back in the process, you try to also understand why and how each and every product is being made eventually. And then when you go back to R&D, if you're in procurement organization, you're going back to R&D, you question, why did we use this material? Why did we use this particular process? Why is the design done in a certain way, etc.? So these are the kind of thoughts that you would push across to R&D. And then once you analyze these different elements, you end up with maybe some ideas of cost reduction, maybe some ideas of value stream optimization, lean optimization, etc., that can help you assess the costs and eventually reduce or avoid these costs, right? So this again becomes a very strong tool to question R&D as to why this was being done in a certain way, for you to enhance, for you to assess the procedures, and then eventually end up with cost avoidance or cost reductions using the answers, right? So it's a tool that you can use to question and challenge the R&D department as to why this was being done in that particular manner. Okay, and that can help you question and maybe have some innovations through that. Okay, so I'm just looking at any useful tools. So there are, I'm not endorsing any specific tool here. We used to do this ourselves. We built in certain tools in Excel. We downloaded certain templates and built on top of this. So we had a lot of cost models built through this kind of a process. But there are systems available on the on in the market that you can use eventually. But unfortunately, I cannot endorse any directly. Okay, right, Robert. Okay. Uh, will you share this presentation? Yes, I will. Yeah, I will share this presentation. Yeah, so Fred has already answered that. In the next few days, we'll be sharing this. Okay. One of the questions that I also get quite often is on whether this, as we talked, it's product teardown, whether this is applicable for services. This is one of the classical ones that I get. So in services, the basic notion is product teardown. Okay. So in services, we are largely talking about labor costs in some way, right? So it's not directly applicable for services. I wouldn't say maybe, or I won't want to be vague. If I want to answer directly, I would say no, it is not applicable. But there are certain cases where you have, if you look at the Apple self-service, right? So if you have a product, Apple, and you want to make some small repairs, there are a lot of videos on this on YouTube that you can see. So after sales service is one area in which you could use it. But that's again after sales service, which is very specific, because you know the product, how it is broken down, which part comes where. If you want to exchange or change just one spare part, you could do that yourself, right? Don't need to go back to the manufacturer again. So these are certain areas where you could have that service element. But purely, if you look at services, if you look at very classical services which involves a lot of labor, then I wouldn't recommend this methodology to use. Okay, so that's just to be clear. I don't want to say maybe. Very rare cases, a frank answer would be no, it wouldn't suit well. It's not the best tool. There are other tools to do that, but product teardown would not be the best tool for services. Okay. All right. I don't think there are any more questions. So if not, again, thank you very much for your time. That's it from my side. Thank you very much. And I hope you could pick up certain elements. It gave you some thoughts, interesting thoughts that you can go back and work in your specific areas, and then enhance, build value for yourself, your department, and your organization. All right. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Maite, for your comments. Thank you very much. Bye bye then.